Technology has brought us such advancement. We have conquered the skies, landed on the moon, and now huge advancements in the medical field have brought us the next great leap for mankind, the Artiforges. These artificial organs were to be the saviour of so many desperate people. But what was first seen as a miracle invention soon became a nightmare for those who didn't have a big enough bank account to pay for such a wonder. So remember, if you buy an Artiforg, make sure to pay your bills, or you'll be getting a visit from your friendly local Repo Man. So if you haven't guessed it already, we're talking about the movie Repo Men, which is one of those movies a lot have seen, but they've easily forgotten it. But it's actually a pretty good film. It's nothing special in terms of story or action. What is good is the world building, with obviously things like the artificial organs being very important. So we're going to start our deep dive with the star of the show, the Artiforges. So let's get into it. Artiforges stands for artificial organs. These are advanced mechanical organs that can do as good, if not a better job than our natural organs. They're built to be very similar in design and size of whatever organ they're replacing, meaning they're able to fit into our bodies without causing any long-term negative effects. And the surgeries to insert an Artiforg is very similar to that of an organ transplant of today, but the huge advantage is there's no waiting list for donors. If someone comes needing a new organ, there is always a new shiny Artiforg available, if they can afford it. And even if you can't, you will get an Artiforg, but with some strings attached, but more on that later. To perform an Artiforg transplant requires a skilled medical team and the correct equipment, so hospitals and surgeons are still paramount to the using Artiforgs to their maximum potential. And even with the advancements in medical technology, you can't beat a good old-fashioned team of doctors and nurses. Though there are many reports of black market Artiforg surgeries going on, it's ill-advised, as these are not only highly risky in terms of failed surgeries, but also contamination, and it avoids the Artiforg's warranty, as a licensed professional must perform the Artiforg transplant for a warranty to be withstanding. Even with this amazing leap in medical technology, it does come with significant costs in research and development, also the manufacture of the Artiforgs, as it requires the most advanced facilities and skilled personnel on the planet to keep the Artiforgs to the highest possible standards. Well, that's what the company tells us. Most likely, it's the cheapest possible locations with the staff only as qualified as absolutely necessary, as long as it doesn't impact the quality of the Artiforgs to the point where it's detrimental to the company's revenue and reputation. Now, the Artiforgs are amazing, but one thing they are not is cheap. They cost an exorbitant amount of money for the average person, with the Artiforgs ranging from the tens of thousands into the millions of dollars. It can vary massively depending on the type of organ the Artiforg is based off. For instance, a heart would be more pricey than an eye on average, but also there is most likely different versions of each organs, with them becoming increasingly more expensive based off the quality and performance of the Artiforg. Also, you have to factor in the surgery to implant the Artiforg, as someone who has organ failure or other diseases that require this organ replacement, there might be complications which would obviously add more cost to the surgeries, and as Repo Men is based off a future USA with an increasingly private medical care system, there would be little support for those who couldn't afford it or don't have health insurance. And before anyone starts talking about private versus universal healthcare, I don't want to hear it in the comments. We're clearly just talking about the world Repo Man is based in, so if you want to have that discussion, go have it somewhere else. I'm just trying to keep this to this film, so chill. To pay for these very expensive life-saving Artiforgs is easy if you're rich. There's not much of a problem. You need a new kidney? That's $450,000, sir. Done and dusted. But if you can't pay up front, which is 99% of the population, well, that's where the sales teams come in, and they can set you up with a finance plan. So you can pay off the Artiforg over the rest of your life. Well, that depends on how long you live, really. And obviously there's significant interest on top of that. And when buying an Artifog on finance, the cost is heavily inflated, so many have to remortgage their houses, get second full-time jobs, and do any number of desperate actions to keep the cash coming in to pay the bills. Because if you're behind on your repayments, well, it's best to let the lines from the movie explain it. After all, if you can't pay for your car, the bank takes it back. If you can't pay for your house, the bank takes it back. But if you can't pay for your liver, well, that's where I come in. Yes, a Repo Man is sent to take back the Artiforg, as until you pay every last cent you're just renting it, and people in need of Artiforgs have no other options. It's normally a life or death choice. If payment is failed, then your Artiforg will join the reclaim list for the Union, which is the group that makes, manages and controls everything to do with Artiforgs. More on the Union later. So now your Artiforg is wanted, how does a Repo Man locate you? Well, each Artiforg is branded and tagged with a serial number and barcode. This is not just for inventory, but also so they can be tracked down, as Artiforgs can be scanned inside and outside of the body. So if a repossession agent drives by someone with an Artifog on the reclaim list, well, they can scan it, then it's fair game. Obviously, visiting someone who's failed to pay at their home or place of work is an easy way to track them down as well. Now, once the repo man has found the person of interest, they will pacify the individual, normally with the use of a less than lethal weapon such as a taser or stun baton. Then once the person is unconscious, they're asked if they would like an ambulance on standby and other terms and conditions to make sure the reclamation is legal, even though they're normally asked when the person is unconscious, which defeats the point. Then the repo agent will retrieve the Artifog in a clean, professional manner, but realistically, they only care about the Artifog, so they'll cut you open as quickly and as efficiently as possible just to get that out. The damage to you is, whatever, they don't care, as long as they get the Artifog. Unfortunately, the removal of the Artifog normally results in the death of the person of interest, but that's why you're told to keep up with your repayments, because obviously, once a repo man has found you, that's it. You can't bribe them. The only option is to run or fight, and normally the repo man wins. I have to note as well that any damage to the Artifog that obscures or outright removes the barcode or serial number means it can't be effectively kind of logged back into the system. Sometimes if one number is damaged, they can kind of type it in, by themselves. But if you can't scan them in properly, they have to send all the Artifogs back from the local union branch to headquarters. Obviously in the movie this is quite important because it shows basically using other Artifogs to try and bypass the system to make it look like people have done repayments or their Artifogs have been reclaimed. So obviously the union has a very secure system so that you can't basically corrupt the system. And this is important because that means if someone pays a repo man to say, look, I can't afford it, but here's, $50,000, can you pretend that my Artifog has been returned? You can't do it, or it's very difficult to do. So it kind of keeps the repo men honest to the union and stops bribery and corruption kind of creeping in. Now, what happens if a reclaim gets hot? If the person of interest has a weapon like a gun and it becomes difficult to disable them? Well, I'd imagine the repo man can kill in self-defense, but the rules of engagement must be that they're kind of threatened with life-endangering levels of force before they react with such extreme measures. Obviously, the union will turn a blind eye to what happens as long as the Artifogs are returned in good condition, as long as there are no witnesses or evidence of wrongdoing on the part of the repo man. And local law enforcement seems compliant with the union's operations, and I imagine for the right price, any evidence of a repo man acting illegally can go missing before charges are pressed. And repo men don't seem to have any kind of body cams or surveillance devices on themselves, which you thought they would in this kind of line of work, but I imagine that's so they can bend the rules in their favour without recording and providing evidence in future. In an ideal situation, the repo agent will disable a person of interest quickly and with zero collateral damage to property and people in the vicinity. But in cases where there are multiple Artifog reclaims needed, known as hives to the repo agents, though those in corporate refer to these as mass reclaim events, in this situation, heavy and non-lethal weapons tend to be necessary to subdue and pacify the area. But if done correctly, a repo agent can not only find multiple Artifogs in a single action, but they can also earn months of pay in a single night. Some of the weapons we recommend for our repo men are the Advanced Taser Mark 26, a fantastic weapon for clean and easy calming of targets. The FN-303 less than lethal rifle for when a non-paying individual is running away and has created a bit of distance between themselves and the repo men. And for when hives are encountered, we suggest the DefTech 40mm multiple grenade launcher, loaded with a mix of stun and concussion grenades to keep a crowd of non-payers at bay. The Union, as far as we know, is a mega corporation that controls the development, production, selling, regulation, and reclamation of Artifogs. Their value is unknown, but hundreds of billions to $1 trillion is probably expected, maybe even more, who knows by this time. And they seem to operate like a mini sovereign state. They have their own small private army, the Repo Men, and governments and law enforcement seem to allow them to go about their business as they wish. I think large amounts of lobbying and bribes are used to keep the governments and the laws they pass very pro-union, and if any issues arise, we would see politicians coming out to talk about the need for Artifogs and the important work the Union and the Repo Men do. It reminds me a lot of the corporations from Cyberpunk 2077, and kind of like the companies we have and corporations we have in our world today, where they use a lot of lobbying and obviously political favours to get what they want, but obviously that's a different video entirely. One of the most important but underestimated parts of the union is its sales teams. As we see in the film, we hear Frank, the boss of the local union branch, say, "We don't want people taking out bank loans and buying Artifogs up front. We don't make money on that." Obviously they do, but they make a hell of a lot more on a finance plan, when he says the interest rate is around 19%. So if you buy an Artifog for $100,000 on a 19% interest rate over 5 years, your total repayment would be $155,643.31. And if you take longer to repay the loan, obviously it costs even more. Now, this is how the union is able to make such massive profits. I'll also note in the film a man is quoted $618,429 at an APR of 19.6%. Now, I may be wrong, but if you pay this back over 20 years, which seems kind of the reasonable time frame it would take, your monthly repayments would be $10,312.20, and the total repayment at 20 years would be $2,474,926.94. So if I got that right, holy hell, basically the union is quadrupling the cost of the actual Artifog originally, and obviously making massive profits. And obviously if you get, let's say, to $2 million and fail a payment, they get to also reclaim the Artifog and a massive amount of cash. So it's a win-win for the union always. And the union is a great example of what happens when you get a monopoly in a certain area of the market, in this case artificial organs. And with their friends in government, obviously they would not allow any true competition or laws to be passed that are anti-union. So any politicians that kind of rise up saying, oh, we need to bring down the cost of Artifogs or make it kind of a universal right, would probably not last long in Washington, because obviously it's set in the USA. And if a rival company did start coming up with cheap Artifogs, well, the union has an army of repo men, which, these are basically mercenaries. They work for cash. They're not there for loyalty or for, the love of the job. They're there for the big bucks. So if they say to them, look, go to this building, take out the rival company, I could see some corporate sabotage happening if the price is right, obviously, for the repo men. The location of the union office in the film, the local one, is in like a shopping mall, it seems. And it's quite striking to me, as it's, you would think it's more something you would see in a hospital or private medical clinic, but no. It's put out there in the public like a car showroom or a jeweller's. You come in, you see the shiny trinkets, and you go, oh, that's nice. The difference being the people come in are normally, 99% of the time, in a life or death situation. They need these artifacts to survive. They even have like a mascot, so it's family friendly, and everything's very corporate and safe, and it is very kind of like smart marketing on the union's part, because obviously I would expect, like I said, it to be like a private medical centre. You get an appointment, you come in and they say, sir, this is what you need to survive. We know it's tough. But no, it's a sales pitch. You owe it to yourself, you owe it to your family, and the kids are there playing with the weird mascot, which I think is a kidney or a liver. I can't remember. But, it's very creepy, and it kind of tries to make the union seem caring and moral, and they are, pretty much the worst kind of corporation you can imagine. Definitely on the Cyberpunk 2077 levels of kind of morality. But, they play it well, and obviously they play massive adverts on the billboards in the streets to show the union is a smart choice to invest in the Artiforges, and, this is really something for your future, but actually you're probably just going to get in massive amounts of debt and end up getting cut up on the street by a repo man, so, be careful. We also see in the movie that people who are unable to pay for their Artiforges or have illegal ones tend to have to flee the normal areas of society to get away from, the regular repo men patrols and the surveillance on their Artiforges. So they dwell in the most rundown and dilapidated areas of the city or, wherever they are in the country. So these areas are referred to in the movie as black holes or a black hole, as in people go in and nothing comes out. And repo men will patrol them, but normally, it's risky. You've got to be a veteran. You've got to be prepared for a tough fight, because people here are desperate. They know that if they get found, their Artiforges are being taken and they're probably going to die, because they might have multiple. So it's a dangerous place for the repo men to go, but there's always Artiforges to reclaim. And obviously if the payments are overdue, they get an even bigger commission the longer they're overdue. So if someone's not paid for years, that's an even juicy commission for the repo agent. Something that does interest me a lot is that repo men have the ability to retrieve the Artiforges, but also the legal right to enter someone's home and pursue them pretty much anywhere, with very few places being off limits. In a sense, they have more powers than the police, because they don't require a warrant, they just go in. And it's ironic, because the recruitment policy seems to favour people with a tendency to be fairly psychotic, I'd say, or very much emotionless in some sense, because they need to be able to go into, for instance, a family's home, stun a target in front of their family, and as they watch on in horror, remove an Artiforge which will then most certainly cause their death. It takes a certain type of person to be able to do this to someone, and it's not the type of person you'd probably want to mingle with. And the film backs this up when you see some of the scenes. For instance, the first one, when we see Remy and Jake leaving a house around Christmas time, they're covered in blood with the Artiforges in hand, and they burst out laughing. Even though they probably just killed someone in front of their family around this sacred time, And yeah, that's pretty dark, to be honest. It does make me laugh in a dark sense, but yeah, when you think about it, you're like, Jesus Christ, that's brutal. Also, we see Raymond talking to Remy. Raymond's a bit of a weird character, as you can see in the movie. And they recount an incident where he reclaimed an Artifog on the subway, where he literally just went up to a woman and pulled out a knife and then cut it out of her while she's literally just fully conscious. No stun, no anesthetic or anything, just literally go up, stab her. It was literally like a serial killer attack. It was like something out of a terror attack. It was nuts. And these are the types of individuals we're told are the professional repo men. So as you can see, the union is a little dicey in its recruitment. Also, what happens in a situation where the repo man come up against, for instance, police officers? Well, I feel like unless the officers are a particularly high rank or the more specialist branch of law enforcement, for instance, the FBI or the DEA or something, most would stand down, as the repo men tend to be ex-military and kind of psychotic. They also have the backing of the union in financial and legal terms, so when it comes up against a policeman's word, against a repo man's word, we know who would probably win in court. And most police officers will probably be on the payroll anyway by the local kind of union members. So obviously when a police officer sees a repo man doing something, they just kind of turn a blind eye. Is it worth their job? It's probably got what goes through their mind. It may seem cowardly, but actually, if you're a zealous police officer trying to bring down corruption and the entire union is against you, you need to have a very clear plan of attack to go after them. Maybe a Judge Dredd style character would be able to do it, but they're few and far between. Another interesting situation: what happens when a repo man takes a non-life sustaining artifact back? For instance, like an eye implant or an ear implant. Obviously, taking this out will still be very painful and dangerous to the person, but obviously it's non-life threatening. They won't instantly die, but does a repo man have to have an ambulance on standby for them? Do they have to kind of make sure that the person survives after? It's a bit more difficult in this sense, or is it just the same where they just go, no, taking it out after you're just left to your own devices? Probably the second point, where they just literally go, right, I'm taking that eye out, stuff you. But I imagine in our world this would be an insane moral question for most, but obviously in the world of Repo Man, it's literally get our property back, screw you. So pretty brutal when you think about it. The deeper I go in, the kind of worse it gets. We also see in the movie where Remy is rendered unconscious and his heart is stolen. Obviously, spoilers, but too late. I've already done a few in the video. He wakes up in hospital with an artifact that's been implanted without his say-so. Now, obviously, this might be because he's a union member, but he starts to pay the full price. Obviously, he's got a pretty good job, and if he keeps doing his job effectively, which he doesn't, he'll be able to pay it. But the idea is you have to ask for an artifact. So what happens if you're in a car crash and you need a new liver or a new kidney or a new heart, and they just put one in and say, right, you're 600,000 at a rate of 19%? Well, if you refuse, you're going to die. So that also raises legally, do you have to be asked to have an Artifog, or can they just place one in if you're in a critical condition? And what happens if they place one in to keep you alive and you're in a coma, and you wake up 5 years down the line, they say, oh, you owe us like $6 million. So legally it becomes very difficult, because a lot of the times when people might need an organ transplant or need this kind of life-saving medical technology, would be a situation where they're unconscious, or maybe there isn't any family around to give the go-ahead immediately, because sometimes it has to be done very quickly, I imagine. So another major legal and moral hurdle and financial one as well. You can chuck that in at the end. So yeah, it gets even more complicated. Also, what happens when a repo man is killed? So obviously he's going to reclaim an artifact, and maybe there's a struggle, he gets stabbed, he gets shot, he falls off a high ledge, whatever. This is going to happen now and again, and then someone else will be sent out to get the artifact at probably an increased commission on that artifact, because there's a bit of risk. But what happens when someone's able to stop multiple reclaim agents or escape multiple times? Well, that commission must go up quite a lot. There must be kind of a bounty system where the union offers a substantial amount of money to take that person down, because if someone starts to show they can fight back against the repo men, well, it's not just about the money they lose, it's also about sending a message. And the message is, if you don't pay your bills, the union will take back its property. So you could have kind of an elite repo man hit squad that if someone survives multiple reclaims or their artifact is not taken back, then an elite team is sent in. And I imagine they would go in more lethal than less than lethal. So that'd be quite interesting to explore, I guess, if they ever did another movie. Anyway, I think that's it for Repo Man. I can't really think of anything off the top of my head, but, it's quite an interesting one. It's a film I wanted to cover for a while because it's one of my favourites. It's not the best film, but it's definitely worth a watch if you like the kind of sci-fi stuff and stuff where it builds a decent world around it, but lots of mystery left. It's definitely good. Anyway, hope you enjoyed it. Love bringing this one to you. Thanks for watching, guys, and as always, have a beautiful evening.